if someone asked me if I like art, I probably would respond like the majority of teenage boys and said that I really don't care one way or the other too much about it. But in community college, and I think it was in my freshman year, I was required to take an art appreciation class, and I had to make my first trip ever to the St. Louis Art Museum. And that trip opened my eyes to the beauty that is to be found in art and how art can cause us to reflect upon the beauty in the creation. Over time, one of my favorite paintings became and still is Van Gogh's Starry Night. It's evocative of the vastness of the heavens over a calm and silent village. But not all art is so reminiscent of beauty. In fact, some art is quite the opposite. There is an artist, I think he was primarily in the 60s and 70s, named H.R. Geiger. Yeah, you've seen that one. His artwork was the inspiration for the monster in the movie Alien, if you've ever seen that movie. And in fact, there's some of his work that, I don't know, I try not to put too much into things, but sometimes there's some things you encounter them and you get this feeling, and it's not a very pleasant feeling, and it kind of makes you wonder what the spirit is that was at work in the person's mind whenever they were making that. I'm just going to leave that where that is. There is some art that seems to try to throw the idea of beauty to the wind and say that it's a lie, that there is no beauty. There is one piece in the St. Louis Art Museum, an installation piece. I don't know if it's still there or not. It's been a few years since I've gone. But it consisted of window panes, and all of the windows are broken, and there's hundreds, if not thousands, of pieces of broken glass all over the floor. They have it cordoned off so nobody gets hurt. But it's the whole thing. It's an art installation, if you're familiar with those sorts of things. And if you read the description of it, what it is, it's a reminder of an event called Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, which signaled a major phase of the beginning of the Nazi Holocaust. If I remember right, the brown shirts, Hitler's thugs essentially went through the streets of, I feel like it was Dresden, and started smashing the glass windows of all the shops owned by Jewish proprietors. And so it is a reminder of that event. And even in music, we can see this. Whenever I wrote this, I tried to originally think of maybe some more modern examples, but to me, the one that stood out the most to me goes quite a ways back. A couple of my favorite composers are Claude Debussy and Eric Satie. They're often, a lot of their works are very mesmerizing pieces that are both soothing and provocative. Actually, Satie, some people credit him as the inventor of elevator music because he said his music was meant to be in the background and not paid attention to. I kind of disagree with him on that point. I really like listening to him. But they're not the ones that I'm going to make a point of here. They had a contemporary named Igor Stravinsky. And he wrote what I consider this to be the case, and I'm not the only one. Many of his contemporaries said the same as well. He wrote what was considered one of the most ugly and dissonant ballets ever written, called The Rite of Spring. And it came out just in time for the beginning of World War I. Perhaps the reason why so much of art, both in music and visually, seems to turn away from beauty and towards the obscene or the chaotic is because maybe as human beings we've seen too much. Beauty in and of itself is a sign, a signpost, a broken signpost of hope. And the idea that there can be beauty is a hopeful one. It's one that says when you see things and people that are beautiful, that if you see these things, it points to something that says that there is something more, that this isn't all there is, and that there is good, and that there are beautiful things in the creation and in the world. It points to hope, and our world today is very short on hope, and I can understand why. One of the many reasons why I more or less gave up on following the news. I get my dose of current events, but I limit it very, very much so. But one of the reasons for that is because during early coverage of the war in Ukraine, I remember seeing the image of a dead child covered by a tarp laying in the middle of the city street, no bigger than Delia. And that stuck in my mind, and it always has. Our world today is one where it is hard to believe in beauty. But beauty, if it represents hope, is by nature a signpost. It reveals another aspect of the nature of God. If it seems broken in our world today, what does the gospel say regarding beauty that can give us hope and in turn be bringers of beauty into our creation today? So to understand what the gospel is saying to us about beauty, we actually have to go back, and I didn't read these passages today, because the passages that I have are plenty long enough. But in the Old Testament, God creates a good and beautiful creation. And He creates human beings to be His image bearers. He calls upon human beings to share His image in the creation, to bear His glory and beauty into the creation and bring the praises, the glory and beauty of the creation back to the Father. But then humans fall into sin and the world suffers. It's as if you have a beautiful piece of stained glass that has a hole busted through it. It is still beautiful stained glass, but it is broken. Then God makes a covenant with Abraham, saying that through Abraham and his family, God is going to set things right. And He eventually frees Abraham's descendants and allows His glory. And the term glory is synonymous with the term beauty. I believe the Hebrew or Aramaic word is Shekinah. It comes to reside with them in the tabernacle. Now, without going long here, because I've got a long enough sermon here, the tabernacle, the temple, either one, they were set up in a similar way. You had the holy place, which is where the priests came, but then they had the most holy place that only on very special times of the year could the priest go in. And this is where the Ark of the Covenant was. Now the temple and the tabernacle were laid out, interestingly, very similarly to other ancient temples. You would have an outer holy place and an inner holy place, and in the inner holy place, ancient peoples would usually build up and put an image of their god in that place. I think in Nashville, Tennessee, there's a recreation of the temple to Zeus. So, or either that or Athena, I can't remember which one. Get all that confused sometimes. But the point is, if you ever want to see an example of what an ancient temple looked like and how it was laid out, that's not a bad example. The tabernacle and the temple of God's people was similar, except on one thing. They did not have an image of their God in the most holy place. Instead, there was the Ark of the Covenant. It was referred to as a mercy seat. This was supposed to be God's throne, or His footstool, if you will, on earth. And there were two angels on each end of it. And the idea was that when the priest came in to bring the sacrifice in, God met the priest in the empty space between the angels. We're leaving an empty space for the true God to come and encounter His people. You might say, well, that's all well and good, but where is the image of God? He created them on the seventh day in the image of God. He created them, the people going into the Holy of Holies were the image of God, and they would encounter God Himself in the space between the angels, and it is here where they would sprinkle the blood of the sacrifice. I want you to file that away in your brain. We're going to come back to it in a little bit. And this is how God was going to work through His people. His people were to go and be His image bearers for the rest of the world. But the problem was they were still broken human beings. Even though God came and encountered them in this beautifully adorned tent, His people still failed. People go into exile because they tried to put other gods in the place of the true God, and only in the place where only He could dwell, and the world continues to suffer. So is beauty a lie? Well, then fast forward, and in comes Jesus. Jesus as God's glory, tabernacling, dwelling with us. Jesus, how He lived and talked and taught. If He was the embodiment of the glory, the beauty of God, His people, God with us. But then the unthinkable happens. Jesus, whose feet were the beautiful ones that brought good news, are pierced, and He is murdered on a Roman cross. His followers flee. And only two previously secret followers come to claim the body and offer it burial. So that's it. Beauty is dead, right? Well, it says on Sunday, the first day of the week, a new beginning. Mary has gone to the tomb, and Jesus is gone. Peter and John come and look, and they can't hardly believe what has happened. They see the cloths that had been around Jesus lying there, and the headcloth folded and put on the stone. And then they leave, and then Mary is left alone crying. Now, watch this, and I want you to bring back what I just asked you to file away in your memory a minute ago. What does she see? Two angels sitting at the head and the foot, the place where the Lamb's blood was spilled. And they say, "Why are you crying?" "They have taken away my Lord, and I don't know where they have taken Him," replies Mary. And then she hears a sound. Someone in the surrounding garden. The gardener, perhaps. Yes, indeed, but not a gardener. The gardener. When Jesus says her name, the awfulness of death, the thing that causes us to doubt the hope that beauty speaks to, has been overcome. Death is defeated. God's glory came and met His people between two angels over the place where the offering of the Lamb is given. Death is overcome, providing once again a means for God's glory and beauty to go out and permeate the creation. But how? Well, once again, He intends to work through His people. By the seaside, Jesus talks with Peter, allowing him to undo his denial, and He gives Peter the command, "Feed my sheep." In other words, He's essentially saying, go and bear my image. Go and share my glory and beauty. Overcome the darkness with my light. And this is what we as God's people are being called to be His image bearers, and not only just do some good, but to go and overcome the darkness of death and proclaim the hope of resurrection, a hope that says beauty is not a lie. It is a truth pointing to God as the life giver and lover of His people and the creation. But how then do we do that? That's why I have our last passage today, a short one, but very poignant. Paul helps us in Galatians. The fruit of the Spirit, if you really think about it, are all ways that we can make the world a more beautiful place. Loving people, being kind, being joyful and patient, being people of peace and goodness and faithfulness. And this is important. Jesus said that when we are connected to Him, we will bear fruit. But if we don't bear fruit, well, then that indicates that we aren't staying connected to Him as we should. I will confess that I have met some supposedly Christian people in my time that don't really seem to show these qualities of being kind, loving, patient, joyful, peaceful, good, and faithful. And it leaves me wondering if they really do know the Jesus I know, or if they are just play acting. At the least, they aren't doing much to combat the ugliness of our world with the beauty of God's love. The signpost of beauty is set upright again through Jesus' triumphal resurrection, and gives us hope that beauty and life do indeed triumph over death and hell. Let us all commit to be faithful bearers of God's beauty and glory, to be His image bearers to a world that is so desperately needed. Amen.